Hmm. Oh well. If it don't work, it don't work. What's we meant to be? What's up, guys? What's up, everybody? What? It's been like 10, 11 months, something like that. So, yeah, it's been a while. Been a while. Been thinking about jumping on a bunch of times, and I don't. And it's like, you know, figuring things out for myself. Oh, it's been a journey, though. It's been a journey, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the journey. All the connections I made on YouTube and stuff, and the people I've been connected with, so it's been good. It's been cool. But yeah, I just didn't know really what to talk about. Plus, in my life, I'm kind of just, it's kind of weird things going on, in life. So, but I decided to come up today just because I was, started watching some reaction. And I'm like, man, I already have thoughts about this. And I did from the very beginning. And I thought everybody was being stupid. And it's starting to make me think that I just really don't like Christians, man. I don't know, man. I don't know. Good people, but I mean, it must be accurate what the Bible's talking about. Sheep just don't have no brain for themselves. Just so quick to jump on the wagons and always end up looking dumb, And I know because I've been there, I've done it too. I've done the same thing. So, I understand it. So I don't hate on it, but it's just the inability for me. What irritates me is the inability for people, especially Christians, to have an open mind. And it irritates me because it shows the lack of courage that Christians have. They're afraid to look at the world and see the world as a huge place of unknown. It's a huge place of unknown and untapped knowledge and territory, and not to become totally intellectual. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not really into the intellectuals because I have my own beefs with them as well. I'm kind of right in the middle with no family, no friends, nobody that agree, like not agree, but they don't know how to live free. They don't know how to live just live free and have your own mind, have your own thoughts, instead of just regurgitating just, the cliches of what everybody else is saying or what is popular right now. And, it's just super weird and cringy. So, I was having difficult, like, man, what am I going to even do a YouTube channel on now? Like, I don't even, So I guess what I could do is just go live and just, see what happens. I guess that's what we can do. So I don't know. I don't know what else to do. So, but anyway, so there's that West Huff guy, and I seen him, and then I seen all these comments of, after the, gosh, what's that guy? Billy. Is it Billy Carson? I think that's his name. Let me check just so I don't go through the whole video. I'm not saying his name correctly. Okay, yeah, Billy Carson. Oh, and what popped up was Billy Carson is even dumber than Terrence Howard. Okay. I don't know. I don't know Billy Carson like that. That I don't even really care. It's not my, I don't really care. But, and I didn't even watch the debate. I'm going to be real. I didn't even watch the debate. I just that one clip about the Sinai Bible. and all that, and how he got debunked by Wes, and then it just blew up, and everybody's praising Wes. And hey, and I actually appreciate all the study and the depth of of all his work, because it is it takes a long, it takes a long time to be able to, I mean, I'm surprised he knows as much as he does, being as young as he does. So, hats off to him for that. And we're all just trying to learn, and is very extensive in what he knows. So I'm not hating on that at all. I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to his conversation with Joe Rogan. But there's just these little things, man, that Christians do that, and to me, they're not little. But I guess, I don't know. Maybe nobody else sees them. I don't know, or maybe I'm just crazy. But it's just, I can't stand it. I can't, just this. So Alex O'Connor responded to Wes Huff's claim that the great Isaiah book that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls or something like that, which was like in the 1900s, 1947, I don't know, something like that. I think, I don't know, something around there, found way later, and he claimed that it was the same, what blew scholars' minds were that that the book that they found, 2,000 years later, or however many years later, was exactly the same word for word as the book of Isaiah in the Hebrew Bible. So, I just took it for what he said, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, or whatever. Then, Alex had to, he had to come on, because he's like, nah, I can't let that slide, I can't let that slide. So he made a response, and then basically trying to debunk Wes, and then Wes makes an indirect video, which I think it was because of Alex O'Connor. I don't know for sure, but I would assume so. And I just don't respect that. Like, why be indirect about it? Why not just respond directly? I think that's kind of weird. Or just say, look, I'm not going to debate any of y'all. Okay, I stand corrected, and then just move on. But don't be so indirect and acting like you're not responding to a certain individual that has certain accolades of debunking Christian beliefs and stuff like that. So, just be honest about it. And that's just my biggest thing with Christians. It just, when it comes to contradicting them and their beliefs about the Bible, history, whatever it is, their doctrine, their church, they will go through hoops just to defend what they believe. And for me personally, I used to do that too. I did. I actually started YouTube doing that. But then I started really challenging my beliefs and doctrines or whatever, everything. And now I'm just not the same person. But it takes, not to my own horn, I'm not doing anything like that, but it just takes a certain type of courage to do that. You humble yourself, just realize you don't have to know it all. And you can be free to have an open mind and still love God and still, live your life as a Christian, but not be bound by all these things that are actually not true. So, or could not be true, and there's some things that we just don't have answers for that are clear. So once you can get to that point, then you learn to live free and not in fear. And so anyways, so Wes responds to Alex, and then Alex responds again. Okay. And so the third time I'm like, okay, look, I kind of want to see this, and I want to have a live reaction to it, and let's just see what happens. Let's see what happens, and what Alex has to say. So if you guys are tuned in, if you like it, you don't like it, go ahead and express yourself. I don't, I'm here for the fun of it. And so let's just do this. So I'm going to share my screen. If I can do this right, I don't remember how to really do this stuff. Share.
Last week, I responded to Wes Huff on Joe Rogan, accusing him of wrong about the Bible. Since then, I've had a lot of responses, most notably from Gavin Ortland, who I keep getting told refuted me. So I thought we could take a look. In this video, we'll look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Great Isaiah Scroll, also known as 1Q Isaiah A. In a later part 2, I'll address the New Testament topics I covered, like Jesus' divinity, the dating of John.
Are about tiny issues like spelling, not even necessarily errors of spelling, just differences. One scholar notes that these variations are mostly occasioned by considerations of orthography. Orthography is the conventional spelling system of a particular language, kind of like how Americans might use this spelling, color, C-O-L-O-R, but the British people weirdly put a U in that word. The Great Isaiah Scroll, it's under discussion here, contains spellings that reflect its own historical context. So that wouldn't affect the word-for-word claim that Wes made. Word for word doesn't necessarily mean word for identically spelled word. So the 2,600 figure here is potentially very misleading for onlookers.
So this is actually just flat out incorrect. It turns out that those more than 2,600 variants I brought up actually don't include spelling or orthographic variants. There's a whole separate list of orthographic variants on top of the more than 2,600 textual variants, all of which are variants in the meaning of words or sentences. It was biblical scholar Dan McClellan who pointed this out in his own video, so I spoke with him about where this number came from.
That is a widespread piece of misinformation, that the majority of these differences are spelling differences. And it's not the majority, it's not a minority, it's none. This list of 2,600 variants is found in volume 32 of a series called Discoveries in the Judean Desert, which is the official series for the publication of the critical editions of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've worked for quite some time with 1Q Isaiah A, and I knew there are all kinds of variants. So I went and dug out my DJD 32 and all the variants. There are 2,771 of them. And I don't remember any that were clear differences of just spelling. And so I volume and found the editor's own description of what they were doing with the list of textual variants.
The editors clearly specify, as you can see, that this list of variants only counts those which differ, quote, in more than mere orthography or meaning-neutral morphology, though ambiguous cases are included. I want to make it clear, I made this mistake as well. I also thought that the variants were mostly spelling-related, but in trying to correct me, Gavin has reiterated this false claim, arguing that most of these variants are orthographic or spelling-related, when in fact...
Gavin is that guy, I'm pretty sure, and I didn't watch it. I just clicked on it one time, but what's his name? KD, what's his name? Ruslan KD. His thumbnail was basically saying, oh, Wes was debunked, and then the thumbnail kind of illustrated that now this dude Gavin has debunked Alex. So I just want to see if this is true.
None of them are. And as you can see, this mistake has provoked quite a lot of enthusiastic comments, and many popular channels have also leaned on this incorrect point from Gavin's video, like Ruslan KD.
Orthography is the conventional spelling system of a particular language, kind of like how Americans might use this spelling, color,
and Daily Dose of Wisdom.
But the British people weirdly put a U in that word.
Wes himself even shared Gavin's video on Instagram, and so seems to endorse it. But it is simply incorrect to say that most of the variants are orthographic. And I made another mistake as well.
Uh-oh. Who's right? Who's right? We're going to need a response from Wes, man. We're going to need all of y'all. Gavin, KD, you're going to have to, and if you're wrong, then KD, you're going to have to take out that little, that little sound you make when somebody drops a bomb, you know what I'm saying? Because it wasn't really a bomb. So maybe it is, but we'll see. But if not, you're going to have to take that out, bro, because it's just corny.
That more than 2,600 figure actually includes textual variants across a variety of texts, not just the two that we're interested in. So, how many textual variants are there between just the Isaiah scroll and the Masoretic text? Well, Dan McClellan counted all of them one by one.
What I did is I went through every single one of the variants, and if the M was on the other side of the closed bracket, that meant that 1Q Isaiah A differed from the Masoretic text. And I literally just counted them one by one.
And how many variants did you find between the Isaiah scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text?
1,930.
And just to be
And
clear,
I may be off by one or two, but it's in that ballpark.
So hopefully that's clarified now. 1,930 non-spelling related textual variants between the Isaiah scroll and the Masoretic text. Wes Huff said that these texts were word for word identical. He was mistaken, and he's admitted that he was mistaken. But he's also since made a video himself in which he says that he did know there were variants, he just didn't say so clearly at that point in the podcast.
And please hear me out here. I do not think there aren't textual variants in the Isaiah Dead Sea Scroll texts. I don't. In fact, later on in my conversation with Rogan, I specifically say ancient Hebrew doesn't have a vowel system in its writing that's overly comprehensive. And so in the Middle Ages, when you have these groups of Jews who are copying these Hebrew scriptures, who aren't speaking it as much as they're reading it, you got to figure out how to pronounce it because vowels make a difference. But if you took all the vowels out of English, if you were a natural English reader, you could probably figure out what was what if you're looking at the page. And so in the Middle Ages, the Masoretic scribes come up with these vowel pointing systems. And that's what you see when you look at a Hebrew Bible today, is you see these vowels. What I'm pointing out there is that there is an entire vowel system with the manuscripts of the later medieval text that are completely absent from the ancient Hebrew copies that we have, like that of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That means that there are going to be variants that are counted and included that have to do with vowels absent from ancient manuscripts.
Why is he reading off of a... I don't know. I just don't know I don't know, man. I don't know how to feel about that. It looks like he's reading something that he wrote down. I mean, it's not technically nothing wrong with that, but I don't know. It's like Joe Rogan said when he was talking to him. He said, there's some experts that, if you woke me up and you asked me about MMA, I could wake up and tell you exactly, whatever it is that you need to know, and I would have the answer. It don't really seem like he has that right now. Kind of seems like he's wiggling a little bit. But this is what I mean. This is that humbling factor that I'm talking about. Like, I feel like Christians, instead of just admitting that they got something wrong, which is it's not even the end of the world. It's not even a big deal. Like, everybody will forget about it. But by wiggling out, trying to figure out how you can twist it and jump through hoops and stuff, that's what prolongs this, and it blows it up and makes it, now there might be a back and forth with this for, 5 episodes. There might be a whole loop of this. So I don't know. I don't know why he's sitting there reading it. I thought he was the expert. I'm not trying to dig at him. I'm not any expert, but look, I know human behavior, and this, I don't know, it just seemed kind of weird to me.
That are present in medieval ones. I'm not saying that those are all of them or even most of them, but that even that statement to Rogan is a tacit admission that there are, of course, differences.
So if there are differences, and Wes knew that, why then did he say that the texts are word for word identical? Well, the idea is something like this. Although there are thousands of textual variants, they're all basically insignificant and don't affect the general reading of the text. So when Wes says they're word for word identical, he did misspeak, but he's still essentially correct, because despite all of those differences, they're still extremely similar, and things like adding vowel pointing into Hebrew words don't change that. Here's Wes.
If Rogan had done what I did to Billy and asked... Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question? and press me on what I meant by word for word, I would have actually outlined the fact that no two handwritten documents ever match exactly, but that the overwhelming agreement between the Isaiah scroll and the later Masoretic text is shocking, despite orthographic and minor scribal differences.
We've already separated the orthographic variants, so are the rest really all, quote, minor scribal differences? This seems to be the big question. And so for an answer, I wanted to ask someone who really knows.
Yeah, it don't seem like what vowels have even though vowels will be missing in one document and stuff like that. I mean, that's just, I don't see. Never mind.
What they're talking about. Kip Davis, who are you?
I'm a biblical scholar, a scholar of the Hebrew Bible, and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and those long variance lists for 1Q Isaiah A that Dan McClellan showed on the screen in his videos. I'm the guy who wrote those.
Okay, we found our man. So are the textual variants minor scribal differences and nothing more?
Among these textual variants are what the editors of this manuscript have identified also as isolated insertions. The term denotes complete thoughts that learned scribes occasionally inserted into the text they were copying when they considered it appropriate. There's a total, actually, of what they identify as 2 deviations, larger sense deviations from the Masoretic text, which agree with the Septuagint, but then there's 7 more that deviate from the Masoretic text that don't align with anything.
So it's not all insignificant, at least not textually speaking. Sometimes entire verses are altered. And even if some missing verses don't much affect your theological interpretation of Isaiah, textually speaking, and we are doing textual analysis of a manuscript here, is it not significant when entire verses are missing? This is much more than just the addition of vowel pointing into Hebrew words. Well, let's hear Gavin's explanation. You may recall an example I gave in my original video, but some of them are more significant. For instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, the end of verse 9 and all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there.
He proceeds to quote from the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls project to buttress this point, and he's correct about the scroll in question. However, there are multiple scrolls of Isaiah found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in these different caves at Qumran. And one scroll is nearly complete. That's the Great Isaiah Scroll, but there's many other fragmentary texts. The same website that Alex quotes from to get the 2,600 figure also notes around 20 additional copies of the book of Isaiah were found there. And in other manuscripts, that part of Isaiah 2:9 and Isaiah 2:10 are included. And that again is noted from the same website that Alex quoted from.
This was also a popular comment on my video. Once again, Wes is essentially correct. But hold on. Let's look again at the quote that Gavin just put on screen, because there's something suspicious about it. He quotes here a whole paragraph from the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls, except Gavin has actually left out a sentence. If you look at the source for this quote, you'll notice that it's exactly the same, except Gavin has left out the final sentence of the paragraph that he showed on screen. Let's read the sentence he left out. This confirms that these verses, although early enough, were a late addition to the ancient and more original version reflected in the Great Isaiah Scroll.
Yo, so why leave that out? Why leave that out, Gavin? Why? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Why try to twist things, leave things out, and just say, because all the Christians want you to believe that it's shocking, that it's word for word. And now that we know it's not word for word, now they want to, snake their way through now there's multiple books, which, okay. But why leave this out? Why leave it out? If you're so confident of the miracle that happened, why leave that out?
Yeah, that's right. The full quote confirms that these verses are a later addition. Why would Gavin leave that sentence out? The sentence which agrees with the argument I was making. It is incredibly misleading and at best a big mistake.
This is why people like this, like Alex, and you might say, "Oh, I don't need his respect. I don't need." Well, look, if you guys are fighting for the faith and the doctrine, I mean, you gotta be able to say something to people like this, because, from what I remember, everybody's going to all these Christians are going to people's YouTube channels and trying to save the listeners from deception of the one that's hosting the YouTube channel, the video. So why not do it with this if he's going to lead people astray and make them believe that, you know what, maybe I'm just going to believe everything that Alex says and I'm just going to become an atheist. Why not, as a Christian, just come clean with it and give just more practical reasons why you believe what you believe, instead of just leaving things out, twisting it, turning it. It's really just deception. And it's just not, it's cowardly is what it is. It's cowardly. Most Christians are cowards. And I don't know, man. Like I said, I just have this feeling lately. I'm just like, man, I just don't like Christians. Now, I like I can hang out with a Christian or whatever. But as soon as Bible or anything else gets brought up, I can't even hardly listen to it, because it's just regurgitated stuff and interpretations and beliefs, and it's not real.
From Gavin. And in Gavin's response, he actually cuts me off a bit short. Here's where he cuts me off. The end of verse 9 and all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there.
He proceeds to quote from the digital Dead Sea Scrolls.
But look at the very next thing I said, are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there, which tells us that they were a later addition. That's the conclusion of my point. That's why I brought it up. Gavin may not know this, but those other texts containing those missing verses are dated later than the Isaiah scroll itself. That's one reason why on the website it says that this shows that these verses are a later addition. But while Gavin shows a quote on screen explaining that, well, those missing verses are found in other texts nearby, he cuts out the sentence explaining that this shows that these verses are a later addition. Why would he do that? But besides, even without this mistake, Gavin's point is still a non sequitur anyway. Wes Huff said that the Isaiah scroll specifically is identical to the Masoretic text. So what if other, later, separate texts contain those missing verses? This is a clear moving of the goalposts. And there's more. While Gavin mentioned that there are 20 other copies of the Book of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, only 2 of them retain the missing verses that we're looking for, 4Q Isaiah A and 4Q Isaiah B. But both of those manuscripts, which again are later than the Isaiah scroll anyway, are also fragmentary, and so, crucially, don't even contain the missing verses in their entirety. They only contain fragments, and even in those fragments, the words still don't quite match the Masoretic text. To be specific, both 4Q Isaiah A and 4Q Isaiah B preserve the first word of the missing part of verse 9, and that word is different to the Masoretic version, although they do basically mean the same thing, and do not. 4Q Isaiah B preserves the last 4 words of verse 10, and these do seem to match the Masoretic text, and 4Q Isaiah A contains part of the second word of verse 9, the word forgive, and this seems to match the Masoretic text, as well as one other tiny bit of another word from verse 10, which seems to match, but as you can see, it's quite unclear. We don't have any of the rest of the missing passage. No other Dead Sea Scroll fragments preserve this part of Isaiah. So even if we do include other manuscripts, even if we include all of the manuscripts found near Qumran in our reconstruction of Isaiah, which is already a broadening of the goalposts, we still don't find the missing verses in their entirety, as well as being later than the Isaiah scroll, which is the one that we're interested in, still also vary slightly from the Masoretic text.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, if you just want them to be evidence that the Bible hasn't changed, you lose. Like, you can characterize them and you can squint at them and you can try to come up with fuzzy rhetoric, but if you are taking a hard critical look at the data, what it shows is that there is still quite a bit of textual fluidity, and we're seeing the developmental accretion of text to the Bible, and Isaiah 2, 9b through 10 is a perfect example of that. That is something. And it doesn't surprise me that that kind of thing would be omitted from a quotation, because it would be phenomenally unhelpful for his rhetorical goals to have that in there, because that's going to raise more questions than it's going to answer.
One more thing. I said that Gavin has moved the goalposts by talking about these other texts, but Gavin disputes this.
Now, if I heard him correctly, Wes seemed to acknowledge that not all of the Dead Sea Scrolls have the same degree of accuracy. So perhaps he was talking about the overall information yielded from the Dead Sea Scrolls as a collection of texts, rather than just one manuscript among them, because he's certainly aware of the diversity of manuscripts that we have.
But no, Wes was not talking about the whole library of the Dead Sea Scrolls and what we can yield from it as a whole. That seems to me just a blatant misrepresentation. He was quite clearly talking about a specific singular manuscript, the Isaiah Scroll, as separated from the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Seriously, listen to what he says.
How similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
I'll just
Word for
repeat
word.
that. This isn't true of all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but what shocked scholars about the Isaiah Scroll is that it was word for word identical. But Gavin thinks that maybe he was talking about all of the Dead Sea Scrolls and not one manuscript in particular. I have no idea how he's arrived at this suggestion. Once again, compare Gavin.
So perhaps he was talking about the overall information yielded from the Dead Sea Scrolls as a collection of texts, rather than just one manuscript among them.
With Wes.
So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll,
I'll leave it to you to decide what to make of that. Gavin continued.
100% sure what Wes meant by word for word. I'll leave that for him to clarify.
Okay, I get that we're trying to be charitable, but there's being charitable when someone gets something wrong, and being so charitable that we don't admit that they got something wrong. Given everything we've covered, was I supposed
This why you Christians, and look, I'm a Christian too, I guess. I am, but you have to at least be honest, because people like this are gonna tear you up. You gotta just be honest. Now, what appears to me is that Wes is just trying to wiggle himself out of that, and then everybody else is coming to his rescue because they thought this was their saving moment when he debated Billy Carson, and Billy Carson just got shamed. But now Wes, now he's gonna have to. It seems like he's going kind of through what Billy did, and that's why y'all got to stop being so just arrogant and jumping on people. Like, really, if you're going to try to save somebody, and you care as a Christian to save people, but then you condemn Billy because he got something wrong, and then you're condemning him, pushing him away, probably making him feel like, I don't want nothing to do with these Christians because they acting just like everybody else. What's so different about y'all? Going in the comments and bullying and making fun of them. Like now, I mean, I know that they're not the Christian, especially in the YouTube world, are not going to concede to anything, especially him about Wes being wrong about what he said, because it seems like, according to this, that he was wrong and he should have just been honest about it, and they would have been done with. Everybody would have forgot about it. Y'all just shoot yourselves in the foot all the time, man.
to think that by word for word identical, what it have meant was that the Isaiah scroll is mostly similar to the Masoretic, separate to the list of orthographic variants, thousands of textual variants, except where entire verses are missing altogether, in which case, if you collect other manuscripts of Isaiah from the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll find two later incomplete fragments of those missing verses. And if you put all of that together, you end up with a text which is about 93% similar to the Masoretic text. I don't think that's what he meant. I think he just got it wrong. Maybe the texts are still really similar, and that's really cool, but they're not word for word identical in any sense. I'd really like to know what Gavin makes of everything I've covered here. Seriously, Gavin, if you're watching, I'd love to hear from you. But now move on to Wes Huff's own response video. She explains that.
But that's gonna be the exit for everybody. Is, oh, but he's being too he's critiquing too much about wanting exactly word for word, and that's going to justify you guys thinking like, oh, this is a miracle. But he himself said, oh, that's pretty cool how close it was in comparison with the ancient text. So why not just go with that? Why exaggerate it and give, you know, people like this who are atheists or agnostic or whatever, you know, a way to attack you and to destroy your credibility?
That he did in fact misspeak about the Isaiah scroll, but he also tells us why that happened. Let's take a look.
But let me tell you why I said what I said. What was going on in the back of my mind was a quote that I was recalling Gleason Archer's A Survey of the Old Testament, where he talks about the copies of Isaiah found in Qumran Cave 1 in 1947, that they were 1,000 years earlier than manuscripts previously known, proving to be word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible, and more than 95% identical to the Masoretic text, specifically the Leningrad Codex, calling it almost letter for letter with that manuscript. Also, I had only a few months previously to this discussion with Rogan read Old Testament textual critic Emmanuel Tove's Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible, where he breaks down the variants of 1Q Isaiah B and compares them to the Leningrad Codex, describing the differences with the word minutia. Granted, both Archer and Tove are talking about 1Q Isaiah B, and my statement to Rogan was specifically in context to 1Q Isaiah A, but that is what was going through my mind when I had the conversation.
So curiously, Wes begins by admitting that he was recalling two quotes, both of which are actually talking about a different text, 1Q Isaiah B, and not the Isaiah scroll, which is 1Q Isaiah A. But if you were looking closely, you might have seen that even here in his response video, he still misquotes Gleason Archer. Listen again, and I'll jump in.
They were 1,000 years earlier than the oldest dated manuscripts previously known, proving to be word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible, and more than 95% identical to the Masoretic text.
Pause. It's not word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible and more than 95% identical to the Masoretic text. It's word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible in more than 95% of that text. Of course, saying something is identical in 95% of the text just means that it's 95% identical. But Wes misquotes Archer, separating the word-for-word comment from the 95% comment,
proving to be word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible, and more than 95% identical.
Listening is going to make it sound like word-for-word statement was correct and separate from the 95% comment in the quote. Let's keep listening.
And more than 95% identical to the Masoretic text, specifically the Leningrad Codex, calling it almost letter for letter with that manuscript.
Pause again. Wes was talking about the two copies of Isaiah and their 95% similarity with the Masoretic text, and then says, quote, specifically the Leningrad Codex, calling it almost letter for letter with that manuscript. But if you look, Archer has actually switched here to speaking exclusively about 1Q Isaiah B, so not including the Isaiah scroll. He even uses the word but Wes doesn't quote him like that and doesn't make this clear. Look again, read the words that are on screen. Gleason Archer says that these two copies of Isaiah proved to be word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible in 95% of the text. But in the case of 1Q Isaiah B, this manuscript is almost letter for letter with the Leningrad Codex. But Wes says out loud that the two copies of Isaiah are word for word identical with our standard Hebrew Bible, and more than 95% identical to the Masoretic text, specifically the Leningrad Codex. Wes has, at best, paraphrased Archer in a really unhelpful way, which makes it sound as though an unqualified version of the phrase word for word identical was correct, and also that the almost letter for letter identical phrase might apply to both manuscripts rather than just 1Q Isaiah B. And to preempt some comments, you may think that I'm just nitpicking at his words here or being pedantic, but remember, this is Wes's clarification video. his awaited response to the criticism that he got the Isaiah scroll wrong on the biggest podcast in the world. And he's not speaking off the cuff this time. He's thought out and prepared the exact words he wants to say. So I think it's important to point out that even now, when showing us the words that he misquoted on Rogan, he misquotes them again while reading them out. Now, interestingly, Wes does then go on to admit.
That's true. And I pointed that out earlier. I didn't like it that he was reading something that he wrote down while speaking into the camera. Because look, if you're an expert, like Joe Rogan said, you can wake up and you can have an answer. I mean, he is an expert. I'm not trying to take that away from him. You know, I don't mean it like that, but come on, man.
That these quotes are actually mostly talking about the wrong manuscript.
Granted, both Archer and Tove are talking about 1Q Isaiah B, and my statement to Rogan was specifically in context to 1Q Isaiah A, but that is what was going through my mind when I had the conversation.
But does this mean that he was wrong? What does he say in response to this?
At the same time, I have actually been in contact with a number of Old Testament scholars, even ones who specialize in 1Q Isaiah A itself, who have assured me that although there is disagreement across the scholarly spectrum, the statements are equally applied across both documents.
The statements are equally applied across both documents. Honestly, I'm just not even sure what Wes means here, and neither are the.
Just admit you were wrong about it. Just admit you were wrong about it. Because you didn't admit that you were wrong about it, you have nobodies like me wanting to respond to this and show you that, look, man, you need to just all Christians alike, just admit that you don't know, or you were wrong, or you misspoke, or whatever it was. But he's not even admitting that. And that's what I'm talking about. That's arrogance. That's just arrogance.
The experts that I consulted, it's totally unclear. By the statements, I presume he means the quotes that he put on screen. Maybe that's why he altered Archer's quote as he was reading it out, because it does make it sound more like it could apply to both documents. But what does the statements are applied equally across both documents actually mean? Does Wes mean that the letter-for-letter identity that Archer applies to 1Q Isaiah B can also be applied to 1Q Isaiah A? That wouldn't be correct. Does he mean that the Masoretic text is 95% the same if you count both 1Q Isaiah A and B? That's a totally different claim to the one he originally made. Does he mean that Emmanuel Tove's statement, which was only about 1Q Isaiah B, is also true of 1Q Isaiah A, and so applies equally across both documents in that sense? That wouldn't be true either. So what does Wes mean by this? It's completely unclear, and to me, doesn't justify the view that despite him misapplying some misquoted statements about an incorrect text and admitting that he did so, it's not that he was wrong exactly, but rather just imprecise or hyperbolic.
This was admittedly a hyperbolic statement that I should have been much more careful on. Should I have been more careful in my statement on Rogan about the Great Isaiah Scroll and used much more precise language, something to the effect of nearly identical rather than word for word identical, in order to not bring unnecessary and unfortunate scrutiny upon my discussion with him? Yes, but I hope you can see why I said what I said, and forgive me for my lack of precision.
And to be clear, the problem is obviously not that Wes got this wrong. We all do that, especially in high-pressure, unscripted environments. The problem is with the response.
Is it perfectly understandable that he misremembered something because he was commenting on something that he was not particularly well informed about and was not his specialization? And we should give people grace for that? 100%. I'm totally in line with that. That happens to everybody who is engaged in this kind of public scholarship, where we have to try to be generalists. And sometimes we find ourselves commenting on things that we don't know incredibly well. And sometimes we misspeak, sometimes we misremember. That happens. But how you take accountability for it, I think, says an awful lot about what your priorities are and what your ultimate goals are. And I don't think accountability has been adequately taken here. I think the attempt is still to.
I don't know who this guy is, but look, it's because they're Christian, and Christians do not know how to take accountability. They don't know how to do that. They really don't know how to do that. They have way too much pride. They have false humility. And that's the problem here. And they are professionals at wiggling their way out of situations or something they said. They just listen to Wes right there. If you just listen to him and you took it as face value, you didn't know the back and forth, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. But it's not about that. It's about he did not really take accountability for his claim. And if he's going to be the guy that, you know, puts Billy Carson in shame and whatever, come on, man, you're going to have to be able to take accountability, or else what difference are you? How different are you than Billy Carson? Billy Carson ain't admitting nothing, but he's not a Christian. He's not the one claiming to have the truth. You're the one claiming to have the truth. So guess what? More of the responsibility lies on you. And that's the problem. It's an arrogant way of thinking, to think, oh, I have the truth. I have all the truth, but I don't have to take, and because I had the truth, I'm special, and I don't have to take the same accountability as a Gentile over there, whatever. You know, that whole mindset. You know, I know they're all Gentile, or whatever, but you know what I'm saying. Oh, I misspoke. You understand what I'm saying. So it's the lack of accountability that I have a problem with. And then when I see the responses, and I didn't even watch the debate, like I said, I just saw that little clip, and everybody's in the comments dragging Billy Carson as if he's not a soul that they should say, but they're clowning him, making fun of him, acting. What different are you? What different are you than people like him and his followers? No different. No different. And that's my beef with Christianity. You guys are, most of y'all just blind. Y'all just brainwashed, believe what you want, have no courage, have no humility. It's all false humility to the max. And this is my beef with it. It's not because I agree with Alex and his take on God and all that stuff. I don't. But come on, man. You guys are gonna have to. That stuff don't fly on the internet anymore. You guys, you can't just say things and then, you know, act like you don't have to take accountability for anything, because people are gonna put your feet to the fire, and you guys gonna have to just have some humility and say, okay, I guess it wasn't word for word, but I guess you can see why I said what I said. No, just take accountability. Like, oh no, I was wrong about that. You know, I've done it, you know, and that's why I can say it. I have the authority to say it because I have actually challenged my own self, my own beliefs, and I have changed and evolved from that with everyone to see it. So that takes a certain amount of humility and courage in order to do that. And I don't see that, and especially mainstream Christians, I just don't see it at all.
To salvage the apologetic goal of reassuring the audience that their dogmas are safe.
But okay, just one more thing to finish this video off. Even if the Isaiah scroll is not word for word identical with the Masoretic text, isn't it still just amazing to find a possibly 92.5% fidelity between the two texts? Remember,
The overwhelming agreement between the Isaiah scroll and the later Masoretic text is shocking, despite orthographic and minor scribal differences.
isn't it still a wow moment?
Rogan's reaction to the correction of wording should be exactly the same. It is a wow moment.
Isn't it still just amazing and unheard of for an ancient text to be so well preserved?
But here's the thing. There's nothing special about 1Q Isaiah A or any biblical manuscripts in terms of their fidelity or how close they are to later copies of the Old Testament. You could do the same thing with manuscripts of pretty much anything from antiquity. So why are we so shocked and so excited when the Bible, when biblical manuscripts basically just look like all other ancient manuscripts?
That's why, by the way, it would be amazing if the Isaiah scroll was different from other texts in being actually word for word with no variant.
If you want something that approaches that kind of textual fidelity, we have, you know, manuscripts for that too. They just all happen to be manuscripts of the Quran. Now, there are reasons why that is the case that are not miraculous either. It's just the nature of how the Qumran was transmitted and preserved, which is quite different. The circumstances behind that are quite different from anything in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament or the Greco-Roman world. But, you know, that's where those manuscripts are.
And this brought to mind an interesting hypothetical. Imagine for a moment that a Muslim went on Joe Rogan and claimed that they'd found some 1,000-year-old Quran that was word for word identical with the Quran we have today. And imagine this really impressed Joe Rogan as well. If it then transpired that there were in fact thousands of textual variants in that Quran, including entire verses missing altogether, how charitable do you think the Christian community would be to that Muslim's mistake? Especially if it also transpired that he made this mistake because he misremembered a quote about the wrong document. That's a genuine question. Anyway, I want to note that I don't make these arguments in some attempt to validate atheism. I do not think that variants in the Isaiah scroll disprove Christianity, or even mean that we can't trust the book of Isaiah in a broad sense. I was simply calling out Wes Huff for mistakenly saying that the two texts are word for word identical, and I'm now pointing out some mistakes that I think I've found in some of the responses that I've received. So, sorry this was such a long video. Though if you think this was long, Kip Davis actually did a 3-hour live stream on this topic. A link is, of course, in the description. I just wanted to comprehensively cover this, especially because people keep referring me to Gavin's video in particular. Hopefully you can now see why I think his response misses the mark. Whatever the case, look out for part 2 at some point.
All right. I don't know about, for me, the battle, I'm not saying the war, but the battle is given to this guy, Alex, because, yeah, none of those excuses showed any accountability or anything to me, in my opinion, from my view. It was just another Christian way of wiggling out of things, and just because for some reason Christians feel like if I don't prove this, then I'm going to somehow like have to challenge myself and what I believe. And then if I do that, then I don't even know what else, what I'm going to do with my life. Because if I can't even believe in what I believe, then how can I continue living this Christian life? And really, it really is simple. It's just you live free. You live free to be wrong. You live free to be right. You live free to just have an open mind in your life. And you don't have to just try to prove all of these things, these miracles that, you know, this is exactly, it's exactly how, you know, God said it and blah, 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 this and that. It's like, you don't have to do any of that. You could just say, look, Christianity is right, not Islam and, you know, the Muslims, you know, any of that, the Quran. The reason why Christianity is right is because Christianity won. Christianity won. And not only that, but if you apply the things of Christianity, it works. Joe Rogan even admitted that. It just works. So it makes sense just logically. You could just say that. You don't have to have everything right. It's okay to be wrong and not, you know, and I know it's hard. It's hard to challenge yourself and stop ignoring the things that you think already in your mind especially when you're a word for word kind of Christian, like, oh, King James Bible, it's word for word from God. But then once you start realizing that there is actually a lot of errors, then now you have to say, well, is it really word for word? Because if it's word for word, then you're saying God made an error. No, you're missing the whole point, you know? So, you know, the way I see it now is, you know, I appreciate the Bible. I love that it's been preserved. And I love that it was, you know, something that we can look on as an ancient text and the abundance that they have it too, you know, including whatever Dead Sea Scroll, everything, you know, it has accounts of what happened during that time, people's testimony, just like we have testimony. You know, Paul said, and the way I view it is like, it's like Paul said, he said, you are a letter. You are a letter. So you are a letter. You are the New Testament. You know, we are living in this time where, look, it's my experience with God, my faith in God, and Christianity being the one that religion. I guess you could say, I don't even want to say the religion, but it's that belief system that works, and it would work for everybody. But I think that most Christians have a misinterpretation of what even the purpose of the Bible is, what it's for, why we have it, you know. And you know, it's the world is such a big place. There's so much unknown in the world, and Christians are just too afraid to even touch subjects because they're afraid that they're going to be misled, because they don't actually have the courage to walk that path. You know, most Christians don't have the courage to be a Moses or an Abraham walking in the desert, not knowing where to go, because once you dismantle your own beliefs and what you thought certain scriptures are saying, or your beliefs or your doctrine in Christianity, your denomination, then guess what? You're in the desert now. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to believe. And then when it boils down, the only thing that you got, it's not your intellect in the Bible. It's your faith in God, and it's, you know, your life, your experiences, you know. And you know, so you could just go as simple as just saying, hey, you know what, Christianity won, and that's why I believe it. I mean, what other religion has there been that has been like Christianity, really? You know, so it makes sense that God would create something like that for mankind to, you know, believe and follow. So anyways, that's my beef with the Christians. I'm a Christian myself, but I don't really have a home anymore. So I'm open to criticize anybody. So sorry if I made you mad, but it just is.